Hi everyone! Thank you so much for tuning in for another video. The painting I'll be sharing with you guys today came out of me feeling a little festive, a little bit of the holiday spirit, and I was looking to do a painting that I could use on cards that I could later send out to some family and friends. So I started out by drawing thumbnail ideas, and the first thing that I drew was a Christmas tree. And I quickly decided against it because last year I did a Christmas card that had a Christmas tree as the central focus, and I wanted to do something completely different. So I sketched out another box, and I was really stumped. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have any other ideas other than the Christmas tree. So I just drew in 3 little circles to represent the 3 characters I wanted in the card. And I built a picture around it, and what came out was the idea of the 3 little children waiting in bed very eagerly for the next day because Santa is coming. And above their heads are their little stockings for gifts, and I just thought it was really cute to have the cat stocking be in the shape of a paw. So I liked that idea, but I decided to, instead of having them being in bed, I thought it'd make more sense if the stockings were hanging over a fireplace mantle and they are sitting in front of the fireplace. And I was pretty sure that I was going to go with this one because I had a very good kind of gut first reaction to it. But I decided to explore another idea that had just popped into my head. And it was of these characters sitting around a dining room table where they are having their holiday feast. And in this sketch, I pushed the style even further. And I really liked how graphic this looked. I thought it actually would make a really cute card, but I decided to go back to the fireplace idea because of that first gut reaction I had to it, and the dining room table one I see being more graphic in its painting style, and I was wanting to paint something that was a little more painterly, so that's why I decided to go with the fireplace idea. And because I wanted to keep this painting very quick and simple, I did something which I normally don't do, which is to draw straight onto the painting surface as opposed to transferring it from a more finalized drawing that already had its kinks ironed out. I normally don't do this, but I figured that the composition was pretty simple enough, and I really wanted to retain that childlike quality I had in the initial sketch. And I often find when I do take my sketches into Photoshop to finalize the drawings, it does run the risk of becoming a little stiff, and also the risk of me spending way too much time on it. And in order to save even more time, I did another thing that I don't normally do when I am tackling a painting, which is skipping out on the color thumbnail. Now, this wasn't the best idea in hindsight. Color thumbnails are really helpful for figuring out what colors you're gonna use in your piece. But not only that, it lets you figure out your lighting as well. And for some reason, I had just totally forgotten about that. And I just figured, well, it's going to be a very cliched holiday themed painting, so it's going to have a lot of red. And because of the fire, it's going to be very warm. So it's going to have a very warm color scheme that will have a lot of red and green. But I didn't realize that I hadn't quite figured out how I was going to light the piece. And this little oversight of mine does become the major issue of the painting later on. But feeling confident that I knew where this was all heading, I started the painting out by laying down thinner layers of gouache at first, using it like watercolor, and filling in the local colors that I was confident were the colors that they are. For example, the girl's hat is orange because previously I had painted her hat in orange, and the boy's hat is blue because previously I had gone with blue for his hat. So these are colors that I know are there for sure. So I lay these local colors in to establish as a base for me to build up the painting. Gouache is a very, very fun medium to use and very tricky to get a feel for at first. I like to use it by using it first like it's watercolor, very diluted down with water, so that I can lay thin washes of it to help guide me to see where I am going with the painting. And then afterwards I can go in with thicker layers of paint to paint over top once I have a better understanding of what color I have to mix. Some artists have the amazing capability and the confidence to mix these colors right away and put it down and be done with it. I can't do that, so this is why I sometimes use gouache like I use watercolors, so that I can use layers to build up the painting as I go. Once I had all the local colors put in, I started to paint some of the shadows. For example, the shadows that were being cast from the figures onto the fireplace and the floor, as well as the shadows that were being cast from the stockings, and just generally figuring out what is in shadow and making that darker than what I had previously laid down. So initially, my idea was that the fire was going to be the brightest spot in the picture, as well as the rim light on the figures. The fire is behind them, and the little sliver of their sides are catching the light coming from the fire. So that had to be the lightest area in the picture, and everything else had to fall back in value so that it would all group together into the shadow shape. And with that in mind, that's how I started to build the picture. And it took me a little while, but I realized I was making the painting all about the fire, where the brightest point in the picture was the center of the fire and everything else around it was very dark. And so your eyes are immediately drawn to it, but that's not the focus of the picture. The heart of the picture, or what makes the picture interesting and worth looking at, is seeing the expressions on these kids that are waiting for Santa Claus. How excited they are and how impatient they are and how magical it is. That moment of them sitting together all huddled up by the fire, that's what the picture is about. But what I did was put everything that was important in shadow, and I made the focus about the rim light and the bright, look how bright the fire is. So this is how the painting looked like after a few hours, and I hated it. I thought it looked super muddy. The lighting was ambiguous at best, and there wasn't really a focus to the painting other than the fire. And I was just so unhappy with it, and I couldn't see this painting getting any better, so I was ready to give up on it. So I was facing a dilemma. Do I scrap this and go back to the other idea that I really liked, the dining room table idea? Or do I keep going and try to salvage this and feel better about myself as an artist and not feel like I wasted all that time? I decided to sleep on it and take a fresh look at it again the next day. And when I did come back to it, I did feel a little braver, and I felt like I could make it better. I think one of the main things I needed to fix was the muddy color situation. And because I was being very impatient with my applications and I wasn't applying gouache properly, I was watering it down a lot, and because of that, it looked unfinished. It was showing a lot of the paper underneath, and I think it was convincing me that it looked bad when really it might just be that it's not finished. And I also felt like I really needed to bring some more care and attention to their faces, because they're the heart of the picture, and if I'm not in love with the main focus of the picture, then I'm not going to be in love with the picture at all. So I kept these things in mind, and I decided to tackle it again. And this time I was really determined not to noodle around, but to be very decisive with the paint I'm putting down. And so the first problem I tackled was applying thicker layers of paint to make things look cleaner and more finished. I think when it comes to mixing colors with gouache, I get a little bit lazy because gouache is really finicky with getting the consistency and the ratio of water to paint just right. And I always end up not mixing enough paint, so it becomes really difficult to lay down flat and even areas of color with paint because I'm always having to go back and remix that color, but it's never the same. And so I was just putting down whatever that was on my paintbrush, and the result was a muddied and ambiguous look. And to help with the muddy look, I bring in some cooler colors to break up the overall brownness of the picture. I bring some blues into the shadows to make it contrast from the warmth of the light. And doing just that, I felt like helped the muddiness a lot. And the next issue that I tackled is the fire. I decided to knock the value of the fire down, even though it was going against what I think I know of lighting, and if it's emitting light, it should be the brightest point of the picture. But I really felt like it was taking too much away from the characters, so I made it darker, and I felt like that immediately helped draw the eyes forward to the characters, because I think it also made the rim light on them stand out more. Before, it was competing with the fire because they were so close in value, which made me realize that their faces were not very well defined. So I try to bring out their features more, cleaning up some of the outlines and making sure the expressions are clear and legible, and also matching the style that I'm aiming for. I think a part of the reason why I wanted to give up on this piece was because I wasn't super thrilled with how their faces were turning out. So the solution to that was to make their faces more to my liking. And once I paid just a little more attention to them and gave them a little more detail, it really made a difference on how finished the painting looked. And I think this was the point where I could actually see the painting coming together, and I started to like it more. I don't know if you guys can tell, but I'm really inspired by retro 30s and 40s cartoons lately, especially the eyes from those cartoons. I think they're super interesting and creepy and so iconic. And I wanted this piece to have some semblance of that era a little bit. Those were also years of rubber hose animation where their limbs don't really have joints. And that's another look that I was trying to emulate in my piece. Another thing that really helped bring this piece together for me was just the simple thing of putting some details in the stockings and the candy canes that are over the fireplace. It really didn't take much work, but just giving them a little bit more life did so much to bring the piece together for me. Just putting in little brick details of the fireplace makes it look like a fireplace and not just a boring brown wall. And I often find I neglect these little details of a piece that really do a lot more than I give them credit. And I saved the best parts of the painting till the very end, which were the Christmas lights and little sparklies around the characters, which brings out the twinkle in their eyes. I think holiday illustrations have the license to be pretty cheesy, so I was fairly liberal in adding the sparkles, and I think it really helps make the whole thing feel a little more magical. And then the painting was finished. Well, actually not quite. Because I had planned for this painting to be used on cards, I knew I wanted to have some text over it, but I didn't want to actually paint it because I have really terrible handwriting and I'm really bad at designing more of the graphic elements. So I knew if I tried to paint the words in, then I knew I probably wouldn't like it and it wouldn't be flexible enough for me for my purposes. So I took the finished painting and scanned it in and cleaned it up and played around with some text ideas, and here it is. Hopefully it looks more like a card now. I really hope you guys liked how this painting turned out. I think more than anything, I'm just really happy that I stuck with it and I was able to diagnose what the problems were and was able to address them and make the painting more to my liking, which helped me build my confidence back up. And it didn't feel like I had just wasted a whole bunch of time. I easily could have given up and I could have easily just started on a whole nother piece where I might have run into the same problems again. So I really feel like this painting was a very valuable exercise for me, and I feel a little more confident that I will be able to tackle other tough paintings in the future and be able to pull it together in the end. And I'll be including a card into each order I receive on my online store until the end of December in the spirit of the holiday season. So that is it. I hope you guys liked today's video. It makes me so happy that I've been able to do 4 in the last 4 weeks now. Hopefully I can keep this momentum going. So until then, I will see you guys next time. Bye!